Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Oberon, and I am a student at Vanguard University. This is the history of the New Zealand film industry. Just to start us off, we're going to be beginning with the beginning of the industry. We'll be moving on to the evolution of New Zealand's film, and then to what it looks like today. After that, I will go over some of the top movies slash actors slash directors that have come from New Zealand, and this will lead us into globalization of the New Zealand film industry. Then we will go over New Zealand's streaming services and rating system, and then finish off with the conclusion. New Zealand film began in the late 1890s, and the first films were short documentaries. These lasted anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes and usually involved the realities of life in New Zealand. A large amount of these films focused on the scenery of New Zealand to attract tourism. The oldest surviving film is A.H. Whitehouse's departure of the second contingent for the Boer War, which, just a short side note, the Boer War was fought between Britain and South Africa over control of the diamond mines in South Africa. The presence of the Maori people was also sizable, even from the beginning of the film industry in New Zealand. The Maori people are people who settled in New Zealand long before the arrival of settlers from England. But they were a popular subject for films during this time, and mainly for the theme of a noble savage, which those films depicted them as. In 1941, the National Film Unit was created, and this was New Zealand government's way of sponsoring the making of films. This unit used film to advertise tourism, but it also used it to influence its people with films about subjects, like, for example, support for World War II, which was going on at the time. A little bit later, in 1948, the Pacific Film Unit was established, and this was mainly to give another option for filmmakers other than government sponsorship. All right, we'll move on to the evolution of New Zealand's film industry. And the big change came in the 1960s with the arrival of television. This new technology created a boom in the amount of filmmakers and film production in New Zealand. Moving on, next big part of New Zealand evolution was the 70s, which brought the ideas of feminism and gave way to Maori demands for equality as well as labor issues. And you really see this take hold a little bit later when these ideas kind of steep in New Zealand for a while. What the 70s also brought was the New Zealand New Wave, which was a pushback against the New Zealand government. A big film during this time was Sleeping Dogs, which was a dark political action thriller. This movie is also the first movie Sam Neill did as a leading star, and I'll talk a little bit more about him later, but he's a good actor from New Zealand. Also in 1978, just a year after that, the New Zealand Film Commission was formed. And this was the government creating a program to sponsor filmmakers, but more in a way to uh, encourage and promote filmmaking in New Zealand. Now, next few years and comes the 1980s, and this is when the ideas of feminism and equality really take hold in New Zealand from the 1970s. As you in this time you see a lot of women and also people of Maori descent becoming film directors and producing their own films. In 1981 is when Goodbye Pork Pie released, and this is the first local movie in New Zealand to become a smash hit. Uh, Now, in the 1990s and early 2000s as well, you see a lot more people becoming coming to prominence, and these are the really the big directors we see now that are from New Zealand, and this is when they started coming out and making their first marks on the film industry. So this is Peter Jackson, Jane Campion, and Nicky Caro. Those are some of the big directors from New Zealand, and they really came into prominence around this time. right? And now we're moving on into what it is today, and this will start at the 2000s, early 2000s, and then to today. And during this time, you see mainly independent films, independent filmmakers, not a lot of big studio productions. And what this meant was that you needed a lot of government support. So usually very small budgets for these films. And what happened up being was a lot of government or public funding, as well as sometimes you'll get partnership from overseas companies as well. New Zealand also during this time, this is when it comes out as a big shooting location. A lot of big companies, especially Hollywood, have started using this more New Zealand more and more as a film location for some of its bigger movies, and I'll get along that in a little bit. Of course, during this time also is the release of Lord of the Rings, and this is probably one of the biggest pieces of film, the biggest film event in New Zealand history. This is what really puts them on the map, is when the first Lord of the Rings comes out in 2000, and then the second and third movies come out in the next 2 years, 2001, 2002. Another big thing is the what happened during COVID and how that affected New Zealand. Actually, in New Zealand, you saw a increase in production in the film industry during COVID because it is such a secluded nation. Island nation has a very small population, which made it perfect during COVID because there was no real risk of getting infected with the virus. And also, just a fun fact, the New Zealand's film capital is Wellington, the city of Wellington. And if you go there today or even see pictures, it is completely themed around the Lord of the Rings. It almost looks like a theme park. It's a really cool place. And really shows you how the national identity of New Zealand has been almost taken over by the popularity of Lord of the Rings and how much it has brought attention to New Zealand. Right here are just some of the mentions. I have some movies made by New Zealand film industry, movies filmed in New Zealand, as well as renowned directors and actors from New Zealand. First, the movies filmed in New Zealand, by New Zealand, and this is the first start off is Goodbye Pork Pie. This is one of their smash hits. I talked about it a little bit before, but this is one of their most well-known movies besides Lord of the Rings. And if you go on IMDb, there's a list of New Zealand movies to see. This is ranked number one. So this is one of their best known movies. The next one is World's Fastest Indian. And this is just about a man setting the land speed record on his motorcycle, which is an Indian. The Quiet Earth is about a scientist who wakes up and finds that it is only him and two other people that are still there. Everyone else has just disappeared, completely gone. Black Sheep is a horror comedy movie, kind of like the movies that are so bad they're good. And this is about just a mutated sheep going on killing rampage. So a fun horror comedy movie. And next we have Whale Rider. This Whale Rider was directed by Nikki Caro, and this is also a Maori film, and it is about a Maori girl pushing back against the gender norms of her specific Maori tribe, which she wants to become chief, and that usually means, or it has to do with their tradition of uh, riding whales and how the founding member of their tribe, rode a whale to reach the shore of New Zealand. Now we'll come to the movies filmed in New Zealand. These are the more famous ones. Of course, you have the Lord of the Rings trilogy. All three movies were shot and filmed in New Zealand. Avatar 2009 by James Cameron was filmed in New Zealand. The Last Samurai, starring Tom Cruise, was filmed in New Zealand. And King Kong in 2005, who was actually directed by Peter Jackson, same person who directed Lord of the Rings, that is also done in New Zealand. Now we move on to some of the directors and actors from New Zealand. And first off, you have Taika Waititi, and he's a big director today. He came out with Thor, Love and Thunder, I believe, Thor Ragnarok. Those were the most recent of his movies, but he also did a number of films just about New Zealand. I don't know if they might be with New Zealand, but definitely taking place in New Zealand about New Zealand people. One of the recent ones he did was Hunt for the Wilder People. Another famous director is Peter Jackson. Of course, he came out Lord of the Rings. Huge influence on New Zealand. And he it was also born in New Zealand, and he still currently lives there. Geoff Murphy is the person who directed Goodbye Pork Pie, so that instantly puts him as one of the top New Zealand directors for just their local history. Nikki Caro and Jane Campion are big female directors in New Zealand, very famous there. And Jane Campion actually won an Oscar for The Piano, which is a movie she directed. And that hit news lines across New Zealand for the fact that she won an Oscar. A Kiwi is what they're known for. It's what people call them. And that is they were shocked that a Kiwi won the Oscar for that movie. Next, we have some moving on to actors. Start off with James Rolleston. He's not a very big actor, but he is of Maori descent, and he was the leading role in The Boy, which was a movie directed by Taika Waititi. Bruno Lawrence is another big name. He's also an older actor. He's the one who starred in The Quiet Earth, which was a noticeable New Zealand movie. uh Carl Urban. Carl Urban was in Lord of the Rings. He also plays Billy Butcher in The Boys from Amazon, the superhero show. And just a fun fact, the man who plays Homelander, Anthony Starr, is also born in New Zealand. So now you have two mainstream actors in that show, both coming from New Zealand. And then last but not least, we have Sam Neill and Julian Dennison. And they've had some big movies on their own. Sam Neill, of course, from Jurassic Park, but together they were the two stars of Hunt for the Wilder People, which was it's a fun family comedy movie, also directed by Taika Waititi. And that came out recently, and it's about New Zealand. So they're still in, even though they have had global successes on their own, they still come back and do New Zealand films. So it's not just they don't just move on from New Zealand after they have made their fame. Right now we come to the globalization of New Zealand, and we'll start off from the 1980s to earliest is 2020, and in that time, 22 New Zealanders, 22 Kiwis have been nominated for Oscars, or not, sorry, have won Oscars, and many more have been nominated, which is really crazy to think about it when you see such a small population of New Zealand and how many people have won awards from there. Of course, there's the actors and directors, famous actors and directors have come from New Zealand, so that is internationally recognized. And of course, you have the global success of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and this was really what shot New Zealand in the limelight with their just amazing scenery, shooting location, but also just the success of the film and how they took that film and really made it part of their national identity. New Zealand also produces a lot of film festivals, and this is both foreign and domestic. So they are a host to many foreign festivals, but I only have some of the domestic ones on here that they put on themselves. The first one is the Wano Marama, which is a New Zealand International Film Festival. You have Doc Edge Show Me Shorts Film Festival, and those three those really just focus on short films. There's not like a full length film, which is I believe in like an hour up. These really mainly focus on the short films, not full length features. The Wairoa Maori Film Festival is just one of the many Maori themed festivals that they have, and these really focus on the Maori people. Now we come to the streaming services. And so we see here is a lot of the streaming services we have in America are the same over there. They have many of the mainstream streaming services. So you have Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon, Apple TV. And what's really cool though is that they also have a lot of New Zealand specific streaming services. So just a few to name are TVNZ, Neon, which is sometimes also Neon NZ, and then NZ on screen. And that NZ just stands for New Zealand. What's really cool is NZ On Screen actually has the full National Film Unit on there. So these are all the old short films from the 1941, and it has tourism for the scenery, and it also has like war messages to promote support for World War II, which was going on. But the streaming services are also very profitable for New Zealand. By 2027, the revenue from these is supposed to reach 319 million, which is a crazy number. And not only is it just from the actual people paying for these streaming services, but the streaming services themselves partner with New Zealand to for uh, sorry, film locations and things of that nature, and so they get paid for that. So just with Sweet Tooth alone, which was the Netflix movie, it generated 400 or no, sorry, $41.3 million just on that movie alone. And with that movie also created 1,180 jobs. Now, what's might be coming up is a possible tax on large streaming services. And these are the mainstream streaming services like Netflix, Disney that are coming in from overseas. And this way, it kind of prioritizes the national, local streaming services. So that would be TVNZ, NZ On Screen, Neon. So to promote them and kind of make it so these larger foreign streaming services can't monopolize the New Zealand uh, streaming services. Now we'll move on to the rating system, and it's slightly similar to ours in the US, where you have the G for general audience, you have PG for parental guidance, and you do have R, but it does mean something else. Now, where you get a difference is with M, and M stands for mature audiences, which is 16 and over. And they have this sort of instead of the PG-13. And what you see is this is more of a stricter than PG-13 because you don't have parental guidance. But what you do have is you have ages 13 to 18, and those all are very specific in age. So that's kind of what makes up the PG-13 here. And what you see here is you have different versions of each. So you have for example, 13. So if you can't see a movie, if it's restricted 13, it means you cannot see the movie if you were under 13 years old. But another version of this is RP13, which means you're not allowed to see it unless you're 13 or over 13, unless you have a parent or guardian. And that is the case with all 13 through 18. Then we come to R, and R is something we've seen, but it doesn't mean the same. For this, it is restricted to a certain person group or for a particular purpose. So that's why that means it's not really an age thing. Now we come to our conclusion. Conclusion. Now, in conclusion, New Zealand's film industry has a long-standing history of production with a considerable presence from the Maori population. The nation has produced some of the most recognized actors slash directors and has incorporated the success of The Lord of the Rings into its national identity. And that is it. That is a brief history of New Zealand film industry from its beginning in the 1890s to today in 2024. And that's it.